Hello, welcome back to the Wedding Capture Co podcast, a podcast for wedding photographers and videographers, with your hosts, me, Chris, and my co-host, Tom.
Hello.
So today we're talking about our editing hacks that we've found for both photo and video that have made our workflows a lot simpler and easier and should hopefully help you get through the editing season. While we're here, I'd also like to talk about the branding and marketing workshop we've got coming up in November. So November the 19th at the Cozy Club, we've got our branding and marketing workshop where we'll be talking about how to sort of target your ideal client and how you can improve your brand to start charging more and getting the couples that you want day to day. So if you're interested in that, then hit the link in the description to find out more about it and get tickets. It's the middle of October and we are very deep into wedding season.
Definitely are,
at this point. I feel like it's definitely slowed down for me, and while I'm really happy to be getting through all that queue and actually get into the edits, because during the summer I'm like, I really don't have time to really focus on an edit. It's still like you get to that point where you're like, I'm doing the same thing over and over, and you really need to sort of streamline that workflow.
Maybe I'll find somewhat, maybe not the opposite, but kind of similar, is that at the moment, all I'm doing is editing because most of my shooting's done. I've only probably got 3 or 4 weddings left of the year. Where in the summer, it's kind of like my editing is almost in like firefighting mode because I know that I'm literally editing in any gap that I've got between shooting. It's like, I just need to get this done. I just need to get this done. But then kind of you got the excitement of, as long as I can get that one done before I go and shoot that wedding, you're still getting almost the really fun element of what you're doing, and the editing is just something which is kind of lingering there.
Yeah.
But now that I feel that most of my shooting's done, I've wanted to make changes to editing or needed something to make that, like I feel like my editing's consuming me now far more than it is in the summer because there's nothing to counteract it with. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? That's
definitely. You don't have those bits where you're like, okay, now you've got to go on a shoot and do something.
It's forcing you out, whereas there's always another wedding to edit. Yeah. So there's another reason to stay at your desk.
You wake up on a Monday morning and it's like, I've got 5 days of editing now. It becomes a point where you're like, and I'm not going to lie, like editing is probably the biggest part. We were just chatting before this, the biggest part of video is editing, because you're creating the story, and we've mentioned on this pod before, like most of the photography is done on the day, so the editing is just like making the small tweaks, whereas for a video most of the stuff is done afterwards. And even though I am aware of that, I do think I do struggle with editing those longer films. I just think they are so repeatable, and you know when, okay, this is probably going to sound really bad, but do you know when you get into a habit of doing something so much, if you're going to get a full-time job and you're doing like a basic admin job, and then you move up and then someone asks you to do that basic admin job again, you're like, but I'm doing like
I've leveled up.
It's like, I feel like longer films are like that. Like my longer films are quite repeatable because I like to make them so that in 20 years time they're still going to be relevant and there's nothing too crazy in them and stuff like that, and they're all great, but I feel like eventually, like, there's going to come a point where someone else should be doing those.
But I think there still needs to be a level of excitement for you, don't you? Particularly for what you've just said, is that I feel with my editing, to a degree, once you've kind of got a grade that you're happy with, and you've got kind of a style down and means of editing, I don't have to be creative, particularly when I edit.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, I've done the creative bit and shooting the day.
Yeah.
The editing bit is just kind of polishing that thing that I've created.
Definitely,
where I think with you're the other way, is you've created lots of things, like you've created lots of bricks in the day, and now you need to build the thing out together. Of it. And so it's kind of, like you need that kind of level of brain capacity to be creative whilst in an edit, to make it something different or something to give you a reason to want to make something exciting out of it. Where I think and again, this probably sounds really bad, but on a base level with an edit, as long as I know that I've shot it really well, there's exciting stuff in there, my joy is kind of reliving through those things that I didn't go, I remember I did that or did that. But as long as I can just colour grade it and make it look nice, it's like, done, next. And it's kind of very matter of fact, where all of my kind of building that story, because it's very chronological in the way that you shoot, it starts at the beginning, finishes at the end. And it's just kind of making that like a competently level of goods that looks nice. And there are certain bits that are more exciting to edit than the others, but I'm not looking at creating one whole thing where you are literally sat there with the whole day laid out in front of you and need to build something from that.
It's like, if going by the analogy of bricks, it's like if like, I don't know why I've gone straight to Lego, but like Lego,
that's how I'd go.
It's like if someone gives you like all these Lego pieces and you've got to make something from it, and then you make something from it, and then you pass it on and someone gives you, and then just someone chucks another 100 Lego pieces on the table, and that continuously repeats, and you know that you can do it because you've done it 100 times before, but you think, I've done this before, and then you're just doing it and sort of going through the motions, but all equally you've got to make sure you be creative with it.
But I think that analogy is great though, because if someone gave you then the same 100 bricks the next time, there are some people then that would literally just build exactly the same house because it worked for the one they just sent down the road. Or there's some of them that for their own kind of fruition would go, let's see what else I can create this time, and try and make a different house, or make a bungalow which is twice as wide, or you know, whatever. And I feel that's a really good analogy to it, is that when you get to that point where just building the same house that you just made is good enough, or that the want to make something really different is there, where I feel like mine is coming in, where the house arrives with me fully built and I just have to choose what colour it is.
That's a very good analogy.
Pretty much it, isn't it? So I guess that's kind of the bones of this episode, without kind of jumping straight in, is that, like today we want to kind of give you our hacks, tips, hints, tricks, processes, whatever you want to call them, to try and make you want to make the different house some more, or find ways that you can have the best of both worlds, I guess, is create something a little bit different, but without that taking a lot longer or draining a lot more of that kind of energy from you.
The two things I've focused on are streamlining the process and keeping yourself sane, because I think like a lot of the things I do see on groups and things like that and from friends is, how do you keep yourself like just going through this editing? Because it is realistically like you finish one, it's straight on to the next one. And I love, and I know a lot of people love, we love editing the highlights films and the trailers and like those like quick bursts of like, this is going to be the thing that we show and everyone loves. But then when it comes to editing like the 15-minute film that has to be pretty chronological, pretty timeless and that kind of thing, you've sort of done it over and over and you're sort of going in between. And don't get me wrong, they're so important and we put so much effort into them. And I think one of the reasons why it's so exhausting is we do put so much effort into them. But it can be grinding when you've got like 15 in the queue and you've got to like get through them.
And I think it is weathering that reasoning, isn't it? Or that belief of, that if you do something different and creative, that when you stand back and admire it at the end, this finished thing, you go, oh yeah, that was worth that effort. That looks really good. Or just kind of get into that kind of like really matter of fact mode of go, that one's done, next, that one's done, next. And it's really easy to stand there and go, I've done 5, I've done these 5 films now and they all look the same, but they'll be fine. But it's almost, you say, using that to kind of to keep that level of creativity or allowing that growth, isn't it? While still delivering a good film that's timeless and that they will love, and also within the time constraints that you've given to your client.
100%. And I think my features are, like I say, when I say repeatable, I don't mean I'm using the exact same format every time, but they're like, there's no crazy editing or transitions or any like, there's not, I've got rid of like the, I used to have like a minute or two at the beginning, which would be like a summary of the day, like just to build it up to like the start. There's none of that anymore. It's all like, it's very much like chronological, and the creativity for me comes from telling the story through the ceremony and speeches, and like, how can I mix the best man's recollection of how the bride and groom met with the groom's recollection of how the bride and groom met with the celebrants like story, and that mix all that together, and that's the creativity for me. But so we want to talk today about our editing season hacks, basically. And obviously it's going to be very different for video and photo, but we're going to try and balance it as much as we can.
Done.
Right. Thumbs off.
I'm done. That's it. Cheers. By Imogen, you're done. That's it. Imagine what you're going to call it. No, it's not. There is more to it than that. I do have more to offer than that. Not a lot, but I do have more.
Every time you mention AI, a tear comes to my eye. But it's just ways that you can streamline your process. Some of this you might do, but some of this might be new to people. So I think it's worth going through what we do in order to sort of like streamline that process.
And I've already thought of a couple of more things I want to add to this as we kind of sat here as well, but I'm going to let you kind of begin. So I think, again, we kind of broke this down into some kind of sections to make it easier for you. Obviously, some bits won't apply to photo so much, where you talk about selecting music and audio and stuff like that, but I think the kind of idea of the gear or the equipment that we're using to edit, and then kind of the way that we cull our footage or images down to a point to what we're going to edit. Then you kind of go through the actual editing process itself of how you kind of do that bit, and then maybe at the end we'll kind of touch on some, again, the staying sane points. And we're not going to try and touch on delivery too much. We're literally looking at the actual physical editing, getting it to the point that it's ready to export or to that. So I think that's
So talking gear, and it's probably the least exciting gear. So that, like, we're not talking about cameras and things like that. But so for me, the first thing that came to mind was editing from the fastest drives possible, and obviously like and if you can have the means, the fastest computer you can get as well, realistically. Because so I edit on M1 Max MacBook Pro with like the SanDisk Extreme Pro SSD, so like the fastest combination that I could find for DaVinci Resolve, and it just is an absolute dream. And the reason I say this is because 10-bit 4K footage takes up quite a lot of computing space as it is, right? So when you start putting your multicams together and things like that, you're going to come across a lot of choppiness if you're not using something, and that choppiness can really make like wear you down as you're editing a full.
I think that's it. Yeah, if it's hard enough to maintain your interest or attention level at something, I find that anything that breaks your attention, and I'm sure there is science to this, that even if like you're waiting for something to render in for even like 5 seconds, in that 5 seconds you could just pull an internet browser tab up and you're on social, or you pick your phone up off a table, where anything you can do to make that process really kind of seamless or less distraction filled, or any window for you to procrastinate, that will make it better. And I know in obviously previous episodes, if you've been following us for a while, that we've both harped on about how changing from the older Macs to M-Chip Macs have been an absolute game changer in making things quicker. Definitely. So if you are still battling on those old ones, like get yourself an M-Chip, and it will make a difference, I promise. Yeah,
it's made a mad difference to my workflow and just everything. And the fact it's a laptop as well, and you can just sort of go portable with it and that sort of thing. Whereas I used to have this like big old custom computer, went to a MacBook, and it's actually faster editing.
Which is odd, because I feel that now that I've moved to a smaller MacBook, I used to have a 15-inch, I've now gone to a 13, so it is more like I can wander with it more. But at the same time, I think, and we have spoken about this definitely when I did make the change, that in terms of gear, editing, even though I can edit on that small screen, having a big screen to edit on and having a proper desk to sit at, we're kind of going to very basics. And I guess there's very little chance that you could afford to edit a video from a tiny laptop sat on a sofa, but with photo you can. I found even just finding yourself a corner of your house or a desk to have a big screen on that you can plug into will definitely make that having an actual somewhere to work from is probably one of the easiest hacks that you can to get editing done quicker.
Yeah, that's a big one actually, which I thought about and didn't write down, is having a space to work from, and like you say, particularly for, I know some people do edit on laptops, but I just flat out refuse to do my main editing on laptops. I'll do culling and things, but I just can't get on with the whole just a tiny little screen. I
used to do all of mine, and I used to say, how do you manage it? I used to do all of my editing on that 15-inch MacBook, and then now I've moved over to my big screen. When I've done a couple of commercial jobs where I've had to edit on site and trying to do it on the smaller screen again, I must admit I have really struggled. And just being able to say, having somewhere to be able to sit at a desk, at a sensible kind of comfy chair and look at my images that big, I kind of feel that it has made, or you can sit down in front of it and go, yes, I can concentrate on the task in hand, which is editing, full screen a window so that all the distractions block out. That alone has made my editing quicker.
You become accustomed to it, don't you? Yes. Like you start to enjoy like the bigger screen and like having more visibility of the detail and things like that. And
I guess for video, that even becomes into the running of multiple screens, so that you can have, say, your clips on one or your timeline. I know that you've spoken in it, we did a whole episode, didn't we, on gear and how you've got like a certain shape screen because it allows you to have your timelines more visible and stuff like that. So
yes, I've got that later on actually, but so I have a 2-screen setup. So one of mine's just a normal 16:9, which is like my sort of is a glossy screen, which is supposed to portray the contrast a bit better, because obviously once you start buying monitors, most of them have that matte coating over them, which ruins your actual like color science from it technically. Obviously you can get quite color accurate ones, but allegedly glossy ones are supposed to be better at portraying that, because a lot of people are watching it back on phones and Macs and things like that. Then I have one which is a strange aspect ratio. I forget what the aspect ratio is. It's like 16:11 or 10 or something like that.
So more square.
Yeah, it's more square. But I have that set to vertical, and then I can have stacked timelines. So essentially I have my timeline with all my cold footage in it, and then my timeline from the film, and all I have to do is drag from one to the other. Whereas if I was editing that on the landscape screen, I could still have stacked timelines, but then my preview window would be a lot smaller. All that stuff kind of helps, and I know it's like that's very like if you've got the money, then of course do that. But
again, time is money. And I think I found that even spending that few £100 on that monitor, I feel that there's like my posture difference, my sanity, and the fact that I need to spend less time at my desk now getting those stuff done and my eyes hurt less, it was more than worth the investment. Yeah, definitely. And hopefully if we are at this end of the summer, you've been shooting weddings all season, you've got lots to edit, you've hopefully got some of that money left to maybe spend some of that on equipment as well.
Yeah, definitely. And what you were saying earlier about just like the waiting of 5 seconds for something. If you're waiting, 20 seconds for a clip to stabilize or for the denoise effect to happen on photos, like then you're going to pick up and do something else. Yeah. And that's one of my biggest reasons to switching from Premiere to Resolve was because Premiere took ages to like stabilize clips, and then like exporting used to take a while. I know they've kind of caught up now. Yeah. But Resolve just seemed a lot quicker in those like little things that you would do. And that was one of my main reasons for switching over, is just like the barrier of like, if you want to do something quite advanced, is it going to take ages to do? With Premiere, I'd stabilize a clip and then I'd like open Chrome, and then before you know it, I'd be in a rabbit hole. I'd like,
and it takes you so long, doesn't it, to come out of that rabbit hole then and get back to work, and then that's more time lost. And I know it's really hard to even entertain the fact of starting to use a new piece of software when you've got a massive editing pile. But I sometimes don't agree with that and argue it's the best time, because you have to learn it, and you've got something you actually need to get done to learn with. I know back in the year when I moved over from using only Camera Raw to move into using Lightroom, which was probably a lot less long time ago than a lot of other people. I think it was about 2018 by the time I actually moved to Lightroom.
Wow, yeah.
And I did that bang in the middle of wedding season. Yeah. And again, there probably was a wedding or two where it took me a while to get things moving again. But because I knew that I had an editing pile that I had to keep up, I was like,
you had to learn.
If I had to learn it fast, and I learned it as I was doing things, as I encountered a problem, I solved it and used it, rather than if you get to the end of the season and go, I'm going to re-edit this wedding just to kind of learn the software. That level of urgency is not there, or dependency, and so your enthusiasm to try and do it goes down. So I think in some ways, it's too difficult. Go back to the way I was, where I was like, no, I'm going to commit to this, and I'm doing it. So I think if you are looking at options, it is worth doing within the season. I think it's the best way to learn.
When I made the transition, I just sort of had one wedding on the go at all times on Resolve. So I was editing in Premiere, but I'd always have one wedding in Resolve on the go.
Nice,
So it was just like, I was just gradually building that up to like, but like you say, it was a real project. So I had to learn on the spot of, I don't know how to color grade this way in Resolve, but I do know how to do it in Premiere. So I need to look it up, and before you know it, you've Googled so much that you just know the software off by heart, and you're going straight for it.
And also the variation in them, because they are doing the same things. There's normally a different function or a slightly different way around, but I know definitely with image software, whether you are using like Capture One or Lightroom or whatever, most of them have fairly similar functions. And I imagine across the video stuff, it is the same. There are a few different ways into things, but the basic layout of having a timeline and a preview window and stuff are essentially the same. So it's not as if you're learning completely from scratch, is it? Like
you're just learning different keys.
You have a beginning of an idea, don't you, of how to work it.
And it's at the same time, it's not specific to Resolve either. Whatever software you find the fastest and quickest, but if you think that you're, something in your software is holding you back, then look into other ways around that, basically.
Or just strive for change as well. I know I speak to photographers that still say to me, how are you getting on with this? Or how do you edit so quickly? I couldn't do that. And it's like, you can. Like, there's nothing video, like, don't be afraid of change. If in the end, like, you've only got to learn that new thing once. And if it takes an hour on this job, but it saves you 10 minutes on the next one, within 6 weddings time, you've already got that hour back. And so it's definitely worth it. And then if, as long as you're going to be in this game for a long time, then you're going to reap the benefits of those changes. And like, you're never too old to learn a new skill, are you?
I worked with and that leads on to, I worked with a photographer who would not refuse to use Gen Fill. Like, no, I'm not using Gen Fill, I'm going to carry on using cloning. And I think they don't use Lightroom, only edit everything in Photoshop, that kind of thing. And I was like, but like, you could use Gen Fill, like it would save you so much time. Just no, I have to anyway. I think it was like 4 months after the wedding, the couple, like, we finally got our photos back, and I was like, that proves that you could just streamline that process.
It's just choosing your hills to die on, isn't it? They're having standards in your image. No, I am. I'm not going to use AI. I'm going to hand edit every single image, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. Or if you're going down the film route, that I'm going to make sure I do this. But at the same time, if you're going to end up with the same result. Like, if you're open to cloning stuff out, why would you sit there and spend an hour cloning out the same thing and then rebuilding whatever it is when you could literally get Gen Fill to do it? I don't understand that.
Also color calibration as well. Again, I've spoken a little bit about color, but like I have one of those spider calibration devices, which I use on my monitor, and that will just make sure that the colors you're looking at are mostly accurate. And obviously there's so much disparity in this, because no matter what screen you put it on, it's always going to look different anyway. But what it kind of does is makes it look good on Mac and iPhone, and very good on TVs, I think. For me, that's what I've kind of found. On Mac and iPhone, it kind of saturates it a little bit more, but as soon as I put it onto VidFlow and put it on the TV, it looks exactly how it did on my monitor. So and that's how I want people to be looking at it.
Yeah, the calibration gives you that level of consistency, doesn't it? It's not saying that, oh, I only edit this way, so it's right for my screen, because how many of your clients actually view their images on your screen? Nobody. So I think I was lucky, I am an iPhone user and have the iPad, obviously, is that I kind of every now and then because I'm using a matte screen, will unplug the screen and flip the laptop open to make sure it's still looking as I want it to on there, or as I'm pinging stuff out to my phone to airdrop it over to use it for Instagram and stuff, I am doing that little kind of hold it up to the screen and make sure that it's still looking as I want it to. I'm not kind of crushing, I'm not leaving too much shadow, not leaving too much in the shadows, because I think it's going to crush it on the glossy screen and stuff like that. I think and an iPhone, I think, is a really good base if you've got one, or an Apple device, because for the most part that most of your clients are probably going to be viewing stuff on smartphones or consuming it that way. So I think it's, like you said, you could hone into kind of perfect color forever, but I think as a kind of level base or benchmark, a kind of standard iPad or iPhone's a really good place to kind of aim it for. Yeah,
just aim for a color that works across. It's always going to look different, but as long as it works across your different platforms. And an iPhone is a good one because it does tend to saturate it, or people will be watching in like the blue light filter mode with like the warm filter on it, or like the different brightnesses that it selects for you. There's all kinds of different things that could affect it.
Yeah, and you can only control that to such a level, can't you? But it's having that kind of base understanding of, this is the best that I can get it, without getting super nerdy and demanding that I go around and calibrate all of my clients' TVs before they view my film or whatever.
But yeah, I've only done to one of my monitors, but you can really tell when, like, if you get an LG monitor, like, it's just the saturation and vibrance is up, and like then you put it on your phone, you're like, oh my god, that's like really desaturated, if anything.
And the only thing that I found as well, which I think if you are looking at buying a new monitor or something to edit on, is make sure that you are looking at something that has the scope to color calibrate it. A lot of these, there's a lot of companies out there, which I know when I look to my monitor, that will offer you gaming monitors which are 4K and stuff, really, and they seem really affordable against the kind of more standard or photography based monitors. But I know for those as well, the colors and the saturation that they give, so that your computer game looks really awesome, probably isn't going to do the same for your photos. So don't be fooled into buying one of those because they're a couple of £100 cheaper than the photography one, because it won't benefit you.
Agreed. And last thing is, like, the cards that you said you shoot with, like you make sure you shoot with just two cards.
Again, trying to make, even before you get to that editing kind of phase easy, I always shoot I try to not change cards during weddings, so when I come to like ingesting my footage, I've only got one card from each camera to put in. Then obviously I kind of sync those footage, timestamp them so that everything's in kind of chronological order, and then do one batch rename over all of it, so that I know then that this folder that lives on my backup hard drive and my working drive is all of the images all in chronological order from that wedding. So when I come to colour it, I'm not colouring it card by card or having to try and resort it all at the end. I have that bit down from kind of my wedding day, where I kind of say timestamp everything and do that. And also as well, I think it's worth saying that I do all of that and culling in Photo Mechanics. So when I'm moving stuff into Lightroom, I'm only moving into Lightroom the images I'm physically going to edit.
Yeah. So how does that work? Does it just export like a catalog that you can put into Lightroom, or?
No, so literally it's just a drag and drop. So I end up making, when I back up my images, I have a folder which is my main backup. Then when I move that folder into Photo Mechanic, and you tick or cross things to cull it, then I have all of the things that I've ticked. I then drag those into a separate folder, which will just be my selected images folder. So I'm then ended up with a selected images folder and a discarded images folder. And then when I come to load into Lightroom, I build the catalog and only ingest the selected images.
Yeah.
Because I think that, and we'll go into that later, obviously, with Lightroom. If you're trying to load everything into Lightroom, for me, it seems counterintuitive to load, say, like 3,500 images in when you're going to bin off then, say, maybe 2,000 of them anyway.
Okay.
So I try and do all of that out of Lightroom because Photo Mechanic loads those files to be cold a lot quicker, or I think it does anyway, than trying to load them into...
And using like the pick tool in Lightroom to pick or flag or whatever it's
called.
Or
using the library function of that. I pretty much only ever use the develop function in Lightroom to literally color grade, and that's it.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So actually that's a good place to go on to culling, really. Similar to you. I mean, I've got 4 cameras at this point, but once I'm in the editing software, because I try and make an effort to make all of my cameras synced up in terms of time. Hopefully once I'm in the editing software and start importing things, when it all goes into one big folder, and then that massive folder, everything, I just, Command A, select everything, drag it into a timeline, and then hopefully everything in that timeline should be perfectly in time order, but all the cameras will be mixed up, so that it's now perfectly chronological.
So do you make sure that obviously before you start filming a day that all of your cameras are set to the same time?
Set to the same time.
Yeah, so obviously anyone will know that shoots Sony that obviously I find it one of the most annoying things about Sony cameras is that when you set the time on them, they don't have the option to set seconds. You can only set hours and minutes on a Sony, where when I used to shoot Nikon, you should set seconds, which made it really, really annoying. So I worked with a photographer as a second a few years ago, and I can't remember who it was, who got me into this habit of you go onto your phone and go to a website called time.is.
Yeah.
And so then it comes up and it gives you an exact time in hours, minutes and seconds. So before I start any wedding day, I bring this up on my phone, put my phone on the table, and I take a picture of that phone with both of my cameras.
Yeah.
So then when I load in at the end of the day, I have to grab that camera, select all of the images from that camera and timestamp it to that phone picture. Then do the same with the second camera. So the second that I merge them, everything to the second is in the right place.
Right, okay.
And the camera and the computer does all of that for me.
That baffles me.
And I find it really, really annoying because obviously on my other cameras you could set the cameras to second and just go at the same time and it would be okay.
That definitely matters more for photo because seconds don't really. I mean, kind of matter, but not as much.
Yeah, if you're shooting stuff in bursts and you were out by a couple of seconds over 2 cameras, if I drop that camera and pick the second one up to shoot, say, a confetti tunnel, you could find then, even in the space of like 5 seconds, that would mess it all out. Mess it all out. So that's the kind of way that I do it. I wish there was an easier way. If someone knows an easier way that you can do it, but for me, that's the easiest thing to do, to literally timestamp everything. And I know to the second that it is okay. Or if you've got like an Apple Watch that shows seconds on the clock, you could just take a picture of your wrist and do it that way. And I know that you can change dates and stuff in Lightroom as well if you do colour in Lightroom, but obviously you're then trying to look in for a moment which you've got on both cameras and you're taking the best guess as to when it is. So long as you take a picture of a clock,
so it all just syncs it up to the time that the original.
You can then just change the data. So it means then when I rock up to a wedding day, I haven't got to worry about what time my cameras are set to. If the clocks go back or forward, doesn't matter.
Right.
Or if I shoot with a second, which is very, very rare, or if I second for somebody, I'll just say to them, and all 4 of us will take a picture of the same phone. So you all know you're all working from the same clock.
I've had a mare a couple of times with seconds this year where it's been like, the camera has been like an hour off or something because of the change in the clocks or whatever, and I feel like, oh no, because it's like all just messed up the footage.
And that's it. And it seems that's probably not an editing hack, but it's setting a really good precedent of kind of things to do, so that that I can get myself to a point where I'm ready to cull as quickly as I can from getting the images off the cards.
I think that's an editing hack. I think that's good. That for me as well, that all goes into the same timeline, and similar to you, I just have it in order because you want to know that everything is in order so that you can sort of go through and tell that story. And
I guess in terms of just data as well, then you can literally skim and you can kind of make sure there's no glaring holes in the day. That as long as you've got prep at the beginning and dancing or sunset at the end, as long as you kind of look through and then your speeches appear and it's a really quick way, isn't it, to tell that there's nothing missing from that backup.
I was showing you the other day, wasn't I? Because I do that as soon as I've transferred SD cards, like the day after the wedding or whatever. I'll then just do the scrub through the timeline, and if I've got 3 huge chunks together, I know that's my 3 angles for the ceremony, and I can just drag them out, and that means that all 3 SD cards have been transferred over. So all that's quite handy. Culling itself is my reward job. I call it, because I separate my work into the creative jobs and the non-creative jobs.
Nice.
The creative jobs being trailer, film, and then some maybe like an Instagram reel or whatever.
And obviously you have stuff broken down, don't you? Because you obviously have the edit tracker to tell couples where you're at with it. So it's nice to have those tasks laid out in there so you can say, this task has been done, this task has been done, and update the tracker as well as you knowing where you are with that film. Yeah,
so in my couples tracker, they literally see culling, ceremony and speeches, trailer and full film. So they see it in stages as well. Yeah. Just so that, because sometimes over the summer, if I do it just in terms of the weddings delivered, sometimes over the summer they won't see much change. But it's nice that they can see like this day, all I've done is cull something, but at least something's been ticked off that day.
They're showing movement in your in your workflow.
Generally, obviously everyone's different. Generally, I'm definitely more active in the mornings. Like my brain's more active in the mornings. So I'll focus on the really heavy creative tasks in the mornings. I won't do any emails or anything like that in the morning. I'll literally get up and I'll go straight into editing a full film.
Same.
So yeah, whatever's the most taxing on my brain, I'll do that immediately. So for the first few hours of the day, I'm editing a full film. And then culling is usually like my last couple of hours of the day. If I've got nothing, like obviously send some emails, and then I'll like sort of treat myself to, okay, I've done quite a lot of a full film. I've done a highlights film today. It's time, like I'm just going to sit back and do some culling. And I cull with like a podcast or TV in the background. And I know that some people will say, oh, well, you should be listening to the audio and whatever. And I get that. I do get that. Yeah. But I've chosen to do it this way. I was there on the day. I know where the soundbite is going to be in the audio, and you can see kind of what you're going to get because you can see if people are laughing in the frame or whatever. So I'm not too worried about that. But I do it as quick as possible. And I do it with a little, I forgot to put this on my notes.
Oh, the little like gaming controller.
I bought this tiny gaming controller. And I didn't realise it was going to be as small as it was. My big old hand, like fingers.
That's what I was like when you put the picture up of it. It literally looked like you had like a Toy Town thing. Like it was. Like, how can you comfortably hold that?
It's not that comfortable. But do you know what? Like I just have the laptop on the sort of that coffee table or whatever, and I just sit back on my sofa. I've got something like a documentary on the background, and I'm just doing this like gaming, like just.
And there are ways you can do it. I've heard of people doing it like with old Xbox controllers and the rest of it. As long as you can get a mapping software for your computer to map the buttons of that controller to it, and I think the science behind it is, isn't it, that it feels more intuitive to hold a controller than it does to hold a mouse for those things, because you can do like you kind of use your L and R buttons at the top. Obviously, you're on a podcast, if you're on a video, you can use your L and R buttons with your fingers to kind of go back and forth, and then say use like the blue button to bin or that to next, or it's a header, or if you're cutting footage and stuff. Where I'm literally doing yes, no, and then next to previous, and
that would help. Like obviously, there's keyboard, and I don't think it's faster, but it definitely is more relaxed, and it's a different way of doing things, and it's motivated me a little bit just because I can then like just have the controller going.
Well, like say a task that you can do without away from your desk without losing productivity. And I know some photographers are fine if they do edit on a laptop that they cull on a bigger screen, because it is something they can do just sat on the sofa with a controller. They're in their laptop kind of wired to the telly and just literally do that, and you can see the images obviously a lot quicker. That's good. Which again is the reason that I use Photo Mechanic, because I find that if I can cull with that fast, and literally I'm pressing next, and the raw files are keeping up to give me that preview almost instantaneously. It's not waiting to load it for me to look at it, and then what should become a really fast and kind of
becomes a laborious process.
It just becomes when you're waiting for the hard drive to keep up.
Culling for photos needs to be quick, doesn't it? Yes. And I play everything at 2 times speed. I have the little right button on the controller set to like play, and if you press that twice it goes 2 times speed.
Nice.
And then like, so with video you can do this in all softwares. You can cut everything on that clip before the playhead. So I literally like go to the bit of where the clip starts, press one button, it cuts everything before that, goes to the bit where it ends, press the last button, and it cuts the bit where I move the camera down and forgets to stop recording.
So you trim all kind of you separating the wheat from the chaff.
Exactly. And that all gets trimmed and then gets color coded into like, one colour's prep, one colour's like detailed shots.
That's clever.
So that when I then go to edit it, I can literally zoom out onto that timeline and I can see where the colours are of exactly what I've got. So that when I'm looking for the long film, I'm like, okay, so start of the day, I'm just going to zoom into the bit of the timeline where the prep stuff is and the location stuff, and I've got all that there, and it's
See, that's really clever. I think however you kind of have that system for culling, whether I know some people work on star systems and have, images that go, 5 stars, definitely want to keep thirds. Yeah. Where I kind of, again, I say, complicated for me, I need to kind of, I like to have an image on a screen and very, very quickly decide yes or no.
Yeah.
And so I think I've written in my notes, I tend to cull pretty fast and usually twice. So my first cull, much like you said, I'll go through it and literally an image will be on screen for a second or two before I decide. If it doesn't grab me straight away, it'll be, no, it's gone.
Okay.
Or there'll be, again, the token pictures of my feet from using the hold fast where the camera hits your side. There'll be some stuff that will visibly be too blurry to even call art. They'll go, or some stuff in the end that you go and go, okay, I don't need that, or that there's 6 duplicates in that moment. I'll just keep that. And even during groups, I'll kind of probably only keep my eye on the bride and groom as long as they're looking and happy. I'll do a very loose cull very quickly. And I think within sort of, even over sort of 3 to 3.5 hours, 1,000 images, within sort of 20 minutes to half an hour, I've done that first cull.
Yeah.
And then from then, I would then probably go back, look up the final number that I've got. If that still seems a little bit maybe too big, I've culled it too loosely, I might go back through again with a bit more of a fine tooth comb, or realise like one of my worst traits is that if I'm at an all-in-one venue, I'll go and shoot some of the dinner room in the morning, and then maybe the chairs aren't in there or the candles aren't lit, and I'll go and do it again later. So I'd rather have some stuff twice than not at all.
Yeah.
So then I can either move that to where it needs to be or work out what's missing from the first bit to the second bit, so I'm not leaving in really duplicate frames, but kind of doing that in the cull then, so I'm not keeping loads of all of it.
And equally, if you're using AI, you don't want to be paying for,
and that's the other thing as well. Now that I've only really started doing that, I used to cull once and then obviously cull the rest as I was editing, but now obviously that would go off to Imagine to kind of get edited with my kind of base grade before I start tweaking. I don't want to be spending, although it's only pennies on each of those images that I know they're going to end up in the bin, so it's worth me doing that second cull before it goes into the Lightroom catalogue, which then I'm sent on to Imagine.
Have you ever ended up with like you've culled it too much and you're like, I haven't got enough photos and have to go back and like get
probably
some of the
like
stuff
once
back?
or twice. I think it's been such a small thing where maybe you've had a wedding where the weather's really turned, or there's been such a low guest number, or weddings where you're really struggling for moments to find to happen. If I found then that I'm literally kind of, I think, that maybe I've been a little bit too harsh, or there's not enough there, I would go back in and see if there's anything that I probably could squeeze out. But I think I can probably only think of 1 or 2 times over the last 2 or 3 years where that's happened.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's very, very rare. It's normally more common that I'll cull and if I haven't culled enough away and go, wow, that's still a big number.
Yeah.
Like, say if I shoot, say, roughly between 3,000 and 3,500 on a wedding day, a loose cull could sometimes still get me to 1,400. Yeah. Where maybe then after the second cull, that might come down to nearer like 900 or 1,000.
Okay,
say.
That makes sense. Quick tip as well with the culling is that I found recently I've started, if I'm offering someone like a 6 to 8 minute film, sometimes I come back with like an hour of footage, and I've started messaging couples and being like, I'm about to edit your long film. Do you like your 6 to 8 minute film, but I have like an hour of footage? Do you want to increase the length of the film for this much money, or do you want to keep like uncut footage for this much money? And people have come back to me and said, oh yeah, we'll increase the length of the film.
Especially
and then you end up getting like an upsell for after the wedding. So
I don't think that's cheeky at all. I think that's very honest. That you're saying, look, obviously trying to sell somebody something that you haven't made before the wedding is incredibly difficult. But then to go after the wedding, I've got this stuff. This is all the good stuff. And essentially, like again, because photo doesn't work that way. I always work on that. You get the best. Everything that I deliver of quality, anything I make of quality is yours.
Exactly.
Where if you're saying, you've only paid for a 6 minute film, but I've got this much of good footage, I could potentially make you a film twice that. It seems, I think as a client, I'll be like, well, I don't want to delete all that stuff because it might be good.
Exactly. Look at all the stuff that lays on the table. And I lay it out that way. Obviously, I'm a business, like making extra money is great. But from my perspective, like I've got all this amazing stuff of their family and friends, and it's going to go to waste. And I'm not going to give it to them for free because that's not how a business works. So,
but like, I've shot one interview before, and I've said that like you go, no, they've only got a 6 minute film, and I'm like, but they've had like 3 speeches, their own vow, singing waiters, epic sunset.
And
it's like
making a 6 minute film.
And it's like, how do you squeeze all of that without literally being like boom, 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 boom on the cut into a 6 minute film? It's like
I find it hard, and often with the 6 minute films, I end up making them 8 to 10 minutes anyway, and I'm thinking, why am I doing this for free? So I might as well offer and see,
But I think it's so much easier to kind of educate a couple and go, do you want this? When they know that there's enough raw material there to sustain that. Where they're trying to pitch their wedding day at the start going, well, what do you think it's going to be? It's this. Isn't it? Or
low hanging fruit, isn't it? But it's already there.
By that point, they know you've got it. And it's because of how much of it do I cut away?
Yeah, so that's a little tip which I found is working this year for me. So next thing is music. This might be a bit boring for you 30 people, but music.
I find it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I find that this comes before the editing. So then once you've culled, before you start to piece something together, then is that when you would find the music?
So for me, it's cull, then ceremony and speeches, then I'll start finding the music.
Okay.
So I'll always lay out the ceremony and speeches on the timeline first. I'll edit it all, and then I'll grab the bits from it. Then if I'm doing a 15 minutes film, I'll then lay out 15 minutes worth of ceremony and speeches into a little story before anything else goes on the timeline. So you've basically got like 10 minutes worth spread out across the 15-minute timeline.
Okay, yeah.
It should tell a bit of a story.
And then
or
you
be
use
in a
the other
narrative.
bits to embellish, to pull away from that to the other moments of the day.
Exactly,
Again, I would have no idea where to start when it comes to making a film like that, or how you kind of, when I watch wedding films and they kind of pull to different parts, I've always wondered, like I say, in my editing is always quite sort of matter of fact. Like I've built that story, and there might be a little bit of shuffling around sometimes in narratives to make that story stronger.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm literally just colour grading from front to back, or from back to front, I guess, yeah.
But I like the idea that if you close your eyes and listen to a 10-minute film, you'd hear the music, some ambient audio, and then the ceremony and speeches, and the bits that I've laid out. So you should close your eyes, and it's basically like a podcast of their wedding film, and you can just hear like, so we met here, and then like it goes into the vows.
Yes, you still get that. It's such a tool that we don't have as photographers.
Yeah.
Is that audio? Like you say, to almost if you can have that on one sense, then the visual element added in again, it makes it even more powerful, doesn't it? So
like you say, it's powerful. It's a big part of what we do. I'll admit that music is a massive part of what we do as videographers, but it's also the bit that drives you most crazy. To be honest with you, I can imagine. I've spent days sometimes looking for music for a video, and sometimes you just cannot find it, and it just takes so long, and it frazzles your brain a bit, to be honest.
And I guess as well, and again, maybe like all you videographers kind of think this is a mad thing to worry about, but I always find it mad that obviously the chances are you're finding a track which matches the tone, the mood of the day, you think the couple are going to like, but obviously you can't use copyrighted music, because like a real easy thing to be able to do is go, oh, that song was their first dance, or that song was their signing, so I'll just use that. So because you can't use that because it's copyrighted music. No. But then it's kind of, but then that might not always match the music they love, might not always match the vibe of the day. Yeah. So I find, let's say, even where to begin to get some music to go, oh, I think the couple will really like that, or that really fits, I think I would not have a clue where to begin. Yeah. So we have, like, there are like popular websites like Artlist, MusicBed, Soundstripe, that kind of thing. I use MusicBed. It's the most expensive, but it gives me the widest range of really high quality music, and the money is well worth the time it saves, where sometimes I'll open the homepage, press the first song, and be like, that's actually pretty decent. So does that use some sort of like AI feel, or is it just kind of select for a set of filters, like you go, I'm looking for something upbeat, or I'm looking for something cinematic, or so you've got filters, you've got playlists which other videographers make, like names that you can click on, and it's songs that they've used. I think when you open the homepage, it's just most popular, but equally you can search like similar songs now to artists. Nice. So there was this bride and groom that really liked 1975, so I put 1975 into the AI and it
search.
Gives you stuff which
gave me a similar thing.
That's cool.
So I used that for a reel that I put on Instagram, and realistically you wouldn't know that I've done that because it doesn't sound much like them. It has that vibe that they clearly like, that indie kind of, it's a feeling, isn't it, as well, pop, the music. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's guitar, or it's piano straight away, and both those instruments kind of set a precedent in tone, don't they, or feel of the day. I choose MusicBed as my hack because even though it's expensive, it does speed it up, because I find the songs a lot quicker on there because I think they're a lot more high quality. But yeah, a couple of things, little like cheat codes. I go through every year, at the beginning of the year, and normally pick about 50 songs through MusicBed. I'll spend a few days looking through and gathering songs of different paces, different types. Some of them will be really acoustic folk, some of them will be a bit more piano, that kind of thing, because obviously for like a barn wedding, I would tend to head towards like the guitars and things like that, whereas for like if you're filming a wedding at a nice country house, I'd go more violins and piano. But do you do that with any level of mindfulness? Like, do you look through the bookings you've got for that year, going, I've got more country houses and more barns, so I'm probably going to need this, or is it literally just based on feeling? No, I'll just go through like and a sort of artists, and then pick out the best ones from those artists and just go for the recommended ones and just carry on from there. And generally, like, you end up getting pretty similar ones anyway, year on year. But yeah, and then I'd separate them into folders, like getting ready, highlights, films, ceremony, like section. So I have like a ceremony section and the long film where like, you know, there'll be some candids over the top of like the vows and things like that, and then dancing. So then when I go to edit a film, I already know, okay, these are all the songs that I've got lined up for the opening. Like,
so it's not a completely blind search. In the morning,
And I know that if I go open in my getting ready folder, there's not going to be anything that's really crazy intense music that I put at the end. So that's been really handy for me. And I want to say I've got no problem using the same music over and over again for couples, because at the end of the day, like, I don't post my features online, and my couples do not care whether that song has been used for another couple.
I think they do as well, because again, if you were using copyrighted music, like, I think you'd be super naive to think that you're the only person that ever dances to Ed Sheeran in a year. And so again, why using that song makes it any different? I think if you were at a point where, like, say, every film had the same song, then it might feel then that people might question your creativity at that level. But if you're working from a kind of a pool of, like you say, kind of like nearly 50 songs, or in the end, different combinations, because what you use for prep might be the same as you use for ceremony and that stuff, the chances of it kind of anybody really clocking on that was that song that you used 2 videos ago in this, unless you were really unlucky and that, you know, you shot a wedding for a bridesmaid from a previous wedding and they had the same song in their film in a different place. But I don't think they know enough that they would care.
No, I mean, like the music that our videographer used in my wedding film, like the film from our wedding, is off MusicBed, and it took me a few listens before I even realised I'd been using that same music.
Used the same song,
because you're so involved in your wedding film and what you're watching. I wasn't thinking always use the music that I use from chapters. You know what I mean? I was enjoying my wedding film.
Watching yourself get married and seeing your favourite people and all the things that you should do
about it. So surely a couple was not going to care. I have no problem using the same music, and that sort of leads on to the next technique that I have, which I kind of borrowed from a guy made to last films. He was on a podcast I listened to recently, and I think kind of made it my own, is that when I edit a film, let's say I'm at this one generic barn, right, and I've edited this wedding film from it, and I think that's good, it kind of relates to the vibe and that kind of thing. I'll then take the songs that I've used in that wedding film, say normally like 3 or 4 songs if it's a 15-minute film, or 3 songs if it's a 10-minute film, and then I'll put them into a folder under their name. And if I come back later on that year and I've got another wedding at a barn and it's a similar vibe, they've had, you know, the same guitarist was there, that kind of thing, or that kind of...
the wedding was just very similar in kind of weather, approach and style.
My starting point will be, I did a wedding like that earlier this year. Let's go to their folder, pick out some of their music. Does it actually work? Oh, this one works, this one doesn't. And then that gives you an initial starting point of how, you know, of what to use music-wise.
And I think that's just working smart. Like I say, I don't think there's any sort of cheating in that or injustice to that couple.
No.
That if you can kind of, if it works for them and you've sought out that music of yourself anyway, and I think you also naturally sometimes can kind of group weddings into, okay, that was upbeat barn, that was more emotional country house wedding, and people as a rule, especially when we do put such effort into our branding and marketing to kind of capture a certain type of client. I'm not saying that you always get exactly the same vibe every time, but there's different facets of kind of your branding which attract different types of people. So you probably have sort of, if you really broke it down, sort of 5 or 6 different kind of groups of people that maybe like the style that you make. And that does that, doesn't it?
You're going to end up with similar weddings, and don't get me wrong, every wedding has its own quirks and it's different, but you are going to end up with feeling like, oh, this is a bit like this, and then like you might as well use what you've already created to, you know, all the ceremony speeches, shots are all going to be different. It's just you're creating that same vibe of the music because the wedding was the same.
And again, when you're overlaying different vows, a different dad speech, different best man speech, it's never going to be that recognisable to that same. It's never going to feel, even for yourself, it's not going to feel like a carbon copy, is it? Of course, it's not.
No, exactly. But those are my music hacks. I think it's quite a slog looking for music, but you can simplify it for the longer films. For the highlights film, for like the short, 2 to 3 minute films or the trailers, I tend to go a bit more hard on making sure that music is either different or it hasn't featured on my Instagram recently, because I don't want a couple to be like, get their in trailer back and they're like, I saw that on your music.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you grade your highlights films or your trailers for Instagram audioless and then use trending music from Instagram, or do you do them with the music bed music the same? Because obviously then, because you could argue that obviously to trend better or on, particularly with Reels or TikTok, you would want to use trending music.
Yeah. So there was up until mid this year, I used trending music on Reels.
Yeah.
But for two reasons I've stopped. One reason is just because branding, like most of the trending music wasn't really like fully on brand or didn't quite match the wedding, but you kind of got to use it because it's trending. That's for this for Instagram. This is for non-deliverables.
Yes.
Yeah. Stuff that the couple hasn't paid for.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because obviously in that you wouldn't be able to use copyrighted music anyway. That's what I'm saying. If you had made that video though, and you were going to purely to make a reel for Instagram, that's what I was asking. Whether you would still look to use that music with that feel, or would you use trending music?
Yeah, but not so much anymore because I've heard of people that have been getting sued for using Instagram trending music, and even though they're a business wild. Using it to advertise.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And obviously. There's a couple of categories on Instagram, isn't it? You can have your business under.
Yes.
Is it a business or is it a content creator? Or
yeah.
something
So
like that?
then you are. Yeah, or you're either a personal page or a business page or a community. I think it is. Yeah.
And if you put yourself as like a business page, you can't actually use a lot of these songs. So there was this hack. Oh, if you put yourself as a content creator, you can use any song. So people started doing that, and then I've heard like chatter of people that are getting like, sued or whatever for using these trending songs in their Instagram reels. So I've just stopped all of that now, and everything is from music.
Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is end up with a lawsuit just to try and get ahead, a few extra likes or a bit of extra reach on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like you say, if it's engaging enough anyway, especially when then you're trying to, I guess it becomes messy then if you're trying to add your own audio to that over the top of trending music, and
you don't always go viral, do you?
No.
And mainly that's a sync license. So I think like if you're like a makeup artist just doing a shot of that shot that they do going around the person after they're finished, and you're putting trending music over that, I don't think it's a problem. It's when you're syncing your video to someone else's music.
So you can clearly tell that it's been beat matched with that track in mind.
But yeah, like trailers and short highlights, I try to keep it to new music that the couple wouldn't have heard if they're scrolling through my Instagram, because it's a bit more personal. Yeah.
Or again, it's more public, isn't it? So if you're a prospective client looking to book you as well, and they literally sit there and look through 5 of your reels one after the other, and they all use the same track. It doesn't say a whole lot about your creativity, does it? No. Where obviously once they've got their own film, that long film is probably not going to be aired in the same way or on the same kind of domain it is to prospectives and the rest of it.
Exactly. It's for them.
Yeah. So once you've got that, obviously, then we move into the actual kind of editing phase, I guess, don't we? So like I kind of spoke about before, once I've done my cull, I then make a new catalogue for that wedding and drag those selected images into that catalogue. I do use a separate catalogue for each wedding. I know some people that don't and like to use one catalogue per year and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I find in terms of speed, if I use one catalogue per wedding, I know then that when it comes to export it, I'm not going to kind of lap in some images from the last wedding or this and that. Or in terms of, say, pretty much just editing speed, the only things that are in that catalogue are the images that I'm going to deliver.
Yeah.
There's not kind of, at this end of the season, for example, I could have an image with potentially nearly 20,000 images in it.
Yeah.
If I was literally just adding
one catalogue,
on one catalogue, and that's got to make a difference trying to load that catalogue up than as if I was just using one.
That's weird because I've always seen Lightroom catalogues as like video projects. You start a new video project every time you do a wedding.
Some people don't. Some people that do work in one per year or just work in one ginormous one and see how big they can let it get. Where I've always been for every job that I do. Only time it's slightly, if I use commercial clients sometimes, which I do a lot of small jobs for, I will have one just for that client because I'm only adding say 50 or 60 images to it at a time.
Yeah.
But for a wedding, I will always use a new catalogue per thing. And then also as well, I also use, which is a thing which I don't know if it's a hack because I think it's probably I learned it from somebody else, but if you don't use it, is build smart previews when you load that in, when you import that wedding.
What does that mean?
So basically it makes a smart preview of that raw file, which is then, that is what you edit from. And a smart preview is only kilobytes big, or obviously where a raw file is 30, 40 meg big.
It's the video equivalent of a proxy.
Yes.
We call it
so
proxy.
So what it allows you to do then is if I say I could build that catalogue, load in the images, build the smart previews, I could then unplug the SSD, take my laptop anywhere and still continue to edit those images.
Oh, so the smart previews stay on your laptop?
They stay on your laptop, so it only builds a smart preview into that catalogue. So it means then that you only edit the smart previews, which because they're only a preview version of that raw file, they load a lot quicker. So you can edit a lot quicker.
So when you're dragging sliders and doing reducing noise, it's not going crazy.
It's not going crazy trying to load the whole file. Obviously, there are limits, and there's kind of different sizes of Smart Preview that you can build. To be honest, I just build the minimal one, because by the time that I come to edit it, I know it's in focus. And stuff like that. So I don't need to almost zoom into 100%. You can almost see enough of the preview to color grade it, pull back highlights, and do all the rest of it as all your grads.
But when you zoom in, are you going to see a difference in
sometimes
quality?
You do get a little bit of a difference in quality if you load the absolute minimal one. But at the same time, I'm not doing that when I'm editing. I'm literally color grading at that point or cropping. So it's okay. And then all you do then is, before you export that gallery, you plug the hard drive back in. It then syncs all the Smart Previews back to the originals, and you export it as a whole at the end. So it just does mean that I can literally take the SSD out whilst I'm editing, and my catalogue then, because I'm only working on that wedding in that catalogue and on Smart Previews, means that you can literally flip between files really quickly and edit really, really quickly.
I think that's a really good bit of advice, actually, because obviously that is streamlined. It's definitely a hack. And I think I've seen a lot of people say, whether it's a photographer getting into video or someone starting up in video, they go in, oh, I've just put this video into my laptop and it's stuttering, and how the hell am I going to edit all of this? And like in videos we have proxies, so it's exactly the same thing really. It just creates a super low res version so that you edit with the proxies, put the timeline together, and when you go to export it, it'll just replace all those with the original files.
And I think as well, when you look at, if you look at almost like a preview of a raw file, that's not the full detailed full this version. So it's just creating obviously a low thing, but they are still pretty good, that if you dragged your highlight slider all the way to the bottom, it would still render the depth in that file as it would from the raw. It's just not loading in that full pixel by pixel thing. It's just creating, say, a quick file that you can work on.
That's
and
really
obviously
handy
as well, if you are using any AI software, it's Aftershoot or Imagine or whatever, the reason that you can upload to them so quickly and them to edit it is you are giving them Smart Previews. So if you're not using Smart Previews, or you're not using an AI, you'll need to learn how to use Smart Previews anyway. Because that's
how long will that take to
AI
to create the Smart Previews?
5 minutes.
Oh really? Okay.
If I was creating, say, like 900 Smart Previews, 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then again to upload that then to the AI software, probably the same. Literally 5 or 10 minutes. As internet speeds get faster, it gets quicker. That probably takes about 15 minutes to do the base edit grade on all of those files and get it back to you. And it downloads it even quicker than that. And obviously then I've got probably a pretty much a set of work, not finished files, definitely not. I know there is a whole episode that we've done on AI last year, but it's definitely got me most of the heavy lifting that I would have to do over my above and beyond applying my preset is normally color temperatures and tints. And so I feel that the AI does a pretty good job in most scenarios of getting that done for me. So all I'm doing then is probably adding my black and whites into those into that, cropping stuff. Some pictures that need obviously like the background brought back in with the smart filters, or adding the sky back in and stuff like that. Or some of them it doesn't quite work for. You need to kind of tweak it a little bit. But for the most part,
gradient filters and things
you
like that.
can do it, and that is an extra pay up thing. You know, they now have options in there that you can make them do smart filters for you. But I think that even just taking that base level of lifting out of it, I'd rather do those myself.
It's again like you've mastered your preset. You know exactly what you want your photos to look like. So it shouldn't be you doing those small level jobs.
And it is a very, very kind of repeatable task. Literally, just leveling kind of a color balance or a color grade. And I imagine again, I know some photographers that shoot in consistent Kelvin all day to eliminate that even more, so that becomes more consistent again. Obviously, I'm still shooting auto white balance, so that might make it. Again, that's a change that I could make possibly to make that even simpler. But again, I think I think some people really over egg editing. That yes, it's probably one of the best ways as a photographer above actually taking the photo to instamp your kind of style and look upon an image. But at the same time, I think it's nothing more than that, and it's really easy to over egg and edit and be like, that image could be anybody's until it's gone through my editing. I don't agree with that at all. I think as long as it's about providing a consistent gallery to a couple which looks the same across a variety of kind of lights and scenarios, but also creating something that looks like yours. But I think that's a bigger picture thing rather than you're there kind of like a painter with like a paintbrush, like applying your masterpiece to every frame in that gallery.
Consistency. That's that's definitely what you look for in a photo gallery, isn't it?
And I guess with the film, maybe it's easier to do because you are maybe working on it more as one thing, because you are doing that creating kind of in that timeline.
Yeah.
Where across a gallery, I imagine it is easier to wander to go, oh, well, prep looks very different to the dance floor, so I'm going to edit them very differently. Where I still think they need to look like they belong in the same gallery.
Yeah, I think it's definitely easier to be consistent. It's like put your LUT on, and that does most of the heavy lifting, and then you just adjust like the grade and things like the correction and things like that. So that keeps that consistent. And then music wise, do you think you have to be kind of consistent in like your style of music that you're choosing for one wedding film? If you go from like violins and pianos to like some heavy
EDM.
dance, it's going to look a bit weird. So there's that kind of consistency. And then how comes you edit backwards?
Yeah, so that was the last thing I said. In order to keep it fresh, sometimes if I have a wedding where maybe prep was really quiet, or I know that, or a day that I'm feeling maybe a little bit kind of lower on energy, if I start editing at the higher energy part of the day, sometimes it makes it an easy way to feel better about gallery.
Yeah.
Where rather than starting with your establishing shots of the venue or the details or the hair and makeup, if you start at the dance floor, once you've edited the dance floor, you're probably into sunset, then you're into speeches.
Yeah.
So you kind of edit a lot of the stuff which maybe requires more of your attention, or the more exciting stuff. You're doing that first, and then you're kind of working your way back.
Boost.
And also, kind of again, if you edit quickly enough that you still have certain memories of the day, you might be kind of second guessing how things play out. Where if you edit backwards, it throws that kind of order out a little bit. Or I even sometimes will start backwards, or even sometimes I find editing group photos really boring because literally you're stamping most of the same thing over a bunch.
Yeah.
So I might start with prep, get all the way through the ceremony to groups, and then got really bored of groups now, then jump all the way to the end and start with the dancing. And then by the time I meet the groups at the other end, whilst I'm probably still bored of editing them again, I know that I've only got, say, 100 images in the middle, and then I'm done editing it.
Yeah.
And that's the momentum I need to get me through editing the groups to then finish the gallery.
The groups is your bit that's just like...
And I think that's one of the beauties of editing photo, is that I don't have to kind of work on it as one whole thing. I can literally, or sometimes if you go, oh, that sunset was really good, I might just skip forward and work on those first, and then go back to somewhere else. As long as you make sure that everything has been graded by the time that you hit export, it's fine.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. That's a good point. A lot of my notes for editing I've actually spoken about already. So the first thing I put was stacked timelines, having two timelines on top of each other so you can drag your clips from one to the other. Already been through that. Creative and non-creative jobs. Sometimes you're just not in the creative mindset to go and create like a full film for somebody, and that's fine. Like you don't wake up every day wanting to create a whole wedding film. So again, having those jobs that you can do, having a list of jobs that you need to do, well, you can just do when you're not feeling it, like editing a ceremony, editing speeches.
Do you find that you edit more than one film at a time for that reason? Because I've done that in the past, where sometimes I've had a couple of edits on the go, and I love my clients dearly, but sometimes you get to a point where you just feel like, I can't look at these same people's faces any longer. Like once you've broke for lunch and come back this afternoon, it's just a way to kind of give yourself that little tidbit of excitement, but you're still being productive to keep working on something and it feel fresh.
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty much working simultaneously on 10 weddings at the moment.
Wow. So I have the brain space for that. That's it. 2's enough for me.
So I've got like 2 full films going, a couple of trailers going, some ceremony speeches going, culling going on a few different ones. So it's all happening at once.
Which is nice. So you really can kind of pick a task that matches your mood to a degree at that time.
And I think that's any time I can be like, right, I'm done with that, but I know I've got a culling wedding to do here, or I'm done with that, but I know I'm feeling good. I know I've got a full film to edit. Like it feels good that I can at any particular time.
Especially like you said, if you treat culling as your reward, and it sounds silly, the kind of things that we do say to ourselves in the day. It's like, but if you just get through this one today, that means that you can do that this afternoon.
You can sit on the sofa and cull,
And sometimes I've had it, and particularly this year where we've had wetter weddings, if I have had a wedding that's had really good weather, or I know one that's got some really good shots, it's almost like, well, if I quick get on and do that wedding now, it means I can edit that one with a really cool sunset afterwards. And again, it doesn't mean that I want to do a bad job on that one, but I probably felt maybe sort of more disappointed about that one because the weather wasn't great or something happened which kind of brought the mood down. It's nice to almost reward yourself with a job which still means that you're getting stuff done. Yeah,
or one where you just like felt buzzing on the day and you just feel like, it's going to be a really nice one to edit. It's going to bring back some good memories. And
exactly. Yeah, definitely.
And the last one was more of a mental thing, and it's editing blocks. I don't edit a full film all in one go, unless I'm fully like 100. I find I lose interest a little bit if I'm doing it if I'm staring at one film, one couple for too long. So normally a few minutes in, I'd like, if it's a 10-minute film, I'll edit 5 minutes of it and I'll be like, right, that's me for the day. I don't want to what I don't want is to get to the end and taper off in my focus, and therefore maybe in the quality just start dragging stuff in and being like, as soon as I notice I'm dragging stuff in and not really thinking about it, I'll come off of that and I'll go to a different task. And that's not like a hard and fast rule. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to do a bit of this film, and then like hours and hours in, I haven't had lunch, it's like 2 p.m. and I've done the film, and like I'm like, well, I've done the film in like 6 hours. That's
the mark of a creator sometimes. I mean, if you do get that kind of engrossed in something, and I actually probably disagree with you with that, but I know I only do because I'm able to, is that if I can edit a wedding once it comes back from Imagine, I try to edit it in one go so that I end up with that level of consistency. Where I know if I start editing something in the afternoon, then come back to it the next morning, even if the light's kind of coming into my office a different way, I'm feeling maybe a bit differently about it. I might find that I start to make things a bit more brighter than they were. And then when you look at it across the course of a whole gallery, this makes me look a little bit disjointed, where if I do edit it all in one go, I do find that, but again, because I'm able over now the course of probably 3 or 4 hours to kind of have a gallery together, that I'm able to do pretty much a wedding a day if I wanted to. Whereas
the process of creating a film generally is more than probably one day's work.
Definitely.
A lot of the time. But I've got short some of the shorter films. I'll be editing a trailer and I'll be like, I'll just start the short film. And then I'll be like on my way to finishing it and be like, this doesn't have to be delivered for another like month or so. And I've got loads of people in front of me. So I end up being like, okay, I should stop that. And I'll come back to it like when it's their turn for their long film to be edited and be like, I've done most of it. Most of it's on the timeline already.
Would you not ever do that? Just finish it and sit on it? So almost finish it and just leave it.
I've got one now, which is like 4th in the queue, but it's pretty much finished. I've realised I missed a couple of bits, so I've got to add them in. But when I get to it, it'll be pretty much finished.
You thank previous Chris. Go, when did you do all this work for
I sat down, I did their trailer, and then I was like, do you know what? I'm feeling good about this trailer. I'm going to do their film as well, and I did it. And all those kind of things. And then last thing we wanted to talk about, getting on a bit on this one.
We are getting maybe we like editing more than we thought we did. It's grown a little bit longer. But I think the last bits now are kind of away from the actual technicalities of editing. It's just kind of a few personal notes, or kind of again about those bits about staying sane, I think, whilst editing. For long periods.
And I guess like I've written it in detail, but just the usual stuff of like, it's really easy during the winter season to be like, wake up, got nothing on today, in my PJs, go and edit. And I think like psychologically it's so much better if you get dressed, like you have your set routine, when do you start, when do you finish, and taking regular breaks and all of that kind of stuff that is already real.
Echoes I think that we said at the start of the episode, didn't we, as well, about even just having a dedicated space, whether you have an office in your house or you have just a desk that you put your computer on, and say the most you can kind of normalise it to be a normal job. And getting dressed is a huge one. I think even if you feel that you're dressed for work, you feel more in that kind of presence of mind to be working, rather than still being, like say, in your PJs that you crawled out of bed in. Although you can, and it's the joy of it. I think there's definitely times that I've edited in my pants in the summer because my office is so hot. But it's for as much as you can, you say trying to keep yourself in kind of wearing work clothes and keeping work hours really does kind of help.
As if you're going to work every day, and having those breaks, even if like you feel like you're really into something, it's going to take a bit of a mental effect on you if you sit there for 4 hours and stare at that screen. Things like mindfulness, like your phone can be pinging, and that's going to be quite like, I know for a fact that if my phone pings, and if I'll get my phone out and read it straight away. So I now try not to have it. I'll have it on complete silence, so I won't see it, or I'll have it out of sight. Sometimes I don't even have it in the office.
Sometimes I've got a drawer in my desk that I'll put one in the drawer for that reason, so I won't hear it go off. Or even I know a lot of people talk about, which you can look that up, a thing called the Pomodoro method, where they have a timer where they agree that if you almost say that, yes, I can be productive for this length of time, you set a timer for say 45 minutes, you work on that task for that time, the alarm goes off, and you force yourself to have a break before you go back into the next period. I think if that's something that works for you, that's something that's really worth trying.
I tried that for a bit, and it does make you productive, but I got really frustrated whenever the alarm went off, and I was like,
I've almost done something.
15 minutes, do nothing. Or like go and do something else.
I don't work that way. Again, I've tried it and it hasn't been for me. No. So I try and again just say try to adopt as much of a routine as I can. I think it really helps in the fact that I drive my wife to work and pick her up from work. So it means that I almost feel like I have a commute.
Yeah.
So that kind of really kind of sets my office hours, that I know that I can't be late to pick her up because she'll be stood on the curb waiting for me.
Yeah.
So I know that I try and work to that deadline, where if it was a day where she was going off somewhere else, I didn't have a deadline, I'll just stay at my desk longer.
Yeah.
Or the fact that I obviously have a dog that wants walking and barks and makes himself quite obvious to me. But it's even those other little things that I've put as well, is that I'm really bad that I'll make coffee in the morning and then go to start work. I'll drink the coffee in 5 minutes and I'm still there 3 hours later editing away, where then I'm probably dehydrated, which doesn't help my headache that I've got from sat in the dark staring at a screen. So now I try and go to the point where I'll go to my desk with kind of my coffee, but also my Yeti full of water and something else. So everything that I've got, I need for the next 3 to 4 hours, I've got, and I take it with me, so that if I've got that concentration level there's no reason for me to break that concentration by having to nip to the kitchen or go to do this or whatever. And even some
I have one, like the big 2 litre bottle with a straw that says you should drink one of these a day, but then I end up drinking like 3 or 4 of them because I drink so much water.
But even just by having it there, it's such a like just to grab it and kind of drink. If it's there, you do it. It's not until you grab it and go, oh, it's empty. Second you walk downstairs to fill it up, your concentration's gone. The door goes, you check the or whatever, and then it takes a while, doesn't it, to get back into it. So I think, say anything like that, you can kind of set yourself up to succeed, not only in the task physically on the computer, but in the way that you get yourself and where you work and the rest of it. That's really vital. And I think the last thing that I put on mine, which is something that I learned definitely the hard way, is be cautious of screen glasses when colour grading. So I found I was getting really bad headaches from being at my office too long. So someone recommended that I get screen lenses, like blue light glasses, to staring at my screen. So I got those. I edited a wedding. I then went and looked at them, and obviously because they stop the blue light from coming out of your screen, they also massively affect the colour tones of your images and make everything look cooler. So then I delivered a wedding, and it didn't have warm. That. It was all the blues were really, really saturated because I had to pump them up to come through the lenses.
Oh right, because it doesn't come through.
Because it muted the blues. And then I found that this whole wedding was like, this is crazy. I had to start and edit all over again. So I find now that if I'm doing particularly admin tasks or doing client calls and stuff, I can wear them. And it does soften the effects of the glare. But when I'm colour grading, I do have to use just my eyes.
Well, never thought about that, to be fair.
Which all people that recommended to me are people that work desk jobs and only type emails and do stuff like that. It's fine for them, but when we obviously spent all that time colour grading, to use something which blocks blue light is not always the best.
I had to try and explain to my optician the last time I was there, because I didn't know quite how much it affected it, but I was getting glasses and they were like, oh, do you want the blue light filter? Because I know you spend a lot of time in front of the computer. And I was like, I don't really think I should, because my work relies on me seeing colours.
Once I realised that's what it was, I literally held them in front of my of my face, and, and was like moving this, and I was like, oh damn it. And then you got to go and edit another however many images all over again.
Last thing for me was a bit of a random one, but for about a month, a year maybe in the winter, I'll give myself half days. And just do half days, and generally my productivity doesn't decrease that much, because you don't realise how much you can get done in a half day if that's all you're giving yourself. And by that I don't mean like I just sit around in my pants for half a day, like
perfectly entitled to. I think that's half a year for sure.
Well, we obviously work like ridiculous hours during the summer, and I kind of take that back in the winter. So like, we have a couple of weeks of holiday in the winter. A week before my holiday, I'll probably do a few half days, and then for the rest of it, I'll go shopping for some holiday clothes, or I'll go to paddle, which is a sport that I've been playing, or I'll do any other hobby or whatever, and just go out and just enjoy the day, sort of thing. And you don't realise how much you're getting done in a half day until you're like, right, okay, well, most of my queue is done. The couples that are left are going to be waiting the right amount of time. So now I can afford to slow down a bit. And when you take that time to slow down, it just makes the job a bit more enjoyable.
But don't you think as well, by limiting the time that you're at your desk, it forces you to be more productive in that time, but you don't feel as chained to your desk because you're getting to do all these other things. So it means that the time you do spend there is a bit more joyous. And I think that we were talking before we started recording about kind of, these like apps that are out now, or kind of devices like Whoop and stuff like that, where you realise, and I was saying to my wife the other day, is I think I underestimated at the end of kind of having a busy month of just how tired I am, where you kind of think, well, sitting on my desk's easy, so I should be able to do that. And it's like, but it's not. Even though you're already tired, if you go into your desk kind of feeling like in kind of a slump or tired from working, even though physically you are sat on your butt in front of a screen, you're still taking a degree of creativity, concentration, and the rest of it. So to spend a morning playing sport, going for a walk, sleeping in a bit more if that's what you need, to when you get to your desk being actually ready to perform at the peak that you need to. I think that's definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah, you got to realise when you're mentally exhausted as well, because although you might be like, oh yeah, buzzing, I've done my weddings, I'm ready to sit down and edit, you sit down and you're knackered. That's because you've just done 4 weddings in a row last week or something. It's not, like, you don't suddenly recover from something like that.
So, and your desk time is equally as important as time you are out shooting. It's not a rest.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was good. I think that was good.
I think maybe we had more than we thought we did. It might have been a slightly longer episode again, but hopefully there's something in there which will stuff that maybe we think that we do kind of quite matter of factly, or we've built into our kind of workflows over the time, that to some of you might be a real changer and kind of help you get through that edit pile a lot quicker.
Yeah, hopefully it's helped. I think that these hacks have improved the way that I edit and made it quicker. Let us know if you've got anything else that you use as well, like anything that you've come across that you're like, this is the way to edit now. Yeah,
we will shout you out as well. We'll let you know that you are responsible for that hack and saviour of our editing piles.
Maybe we can read them out if enough come through. But
that'd be good fun. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, amazing. So
sweet. Well, thanks for listening. We'll catch you in a couple of weeks,
and we'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one.